So, until now, we've seen Lady Ryan and the knights arrive at the scene of the battle, and they wonder what happened there, which created a fissure in the ground. She recalls how they were surrounded by skull faces after a loud sound, and then they were healed while the skull faces turned to dust, when a light suddenly appeared. One of the knights shows Lady Ryan Shin's sword, which created the fissure, and he tells her the sword is the origin. And further now, Newgate episode 5. In starting of episode we see, Knight notices a falcon insignia on the sword's hilt, and he tells Ryan that he's familiar with a blacksmith that makes such swords. He informs her that a high human known as the Black Blacksmith is the most skilled blacksmith of his kind, and he's the only one who can make such a sword. Lady Ryan is surprised by the news about the Black Blacksmith because she doesn't think there are any high humans left in the world. Her subordinate, Gardas, tells her not to worry because they can't confirm that, but he's certain that they're dealing with someone insanely powerful, that the sword is disposable to him. Lady Ryan remembers that the Moon Sanctum is owned by the Black Blacksmith, so she makes a mental note to visit the base when she returns home. Gardas wonders what she'll do now that the high humans are back, and she tells him she'll challenge him to a duel. She's also having fantasies about making him her spouse, but Gardas warns her not to attack him out of the blue while claiming to be testing his skills. Lady Ryan tells Gardas to give her more credit because she's not that senseless, but Gardas doesn't think she'll listen to his advice. Meanwhile, Avis sits down so he can hold the weight of the news Shin is about to tell him. He tells Shin to quickly spill the beans because he's losing his patience, but Shin wonders why he's suddenly so hostile. Avis was bothered that he somehow got Isni to follow him because he knew she didn't follow anyone. While Isni was glad to see Avis after so long, he wondered what spell Shin cast over her to make her his follower. Shin explains that Isni defeated the Lord of the Skullfaces, but Avis threatened Shin with venom, wondering why he's giving Isni the credit when he's the one who unleashed the torrent of mana. Shin wonders how he figured it out, and Avis tells him it was obvious after he popped off a flashy spell and then caught up with them like it was nothing. Avis wonders why Shin is desperately trying to hide his identity, and he keeps threatening him with venom so he would open up. Shin tells him to calm down, and Avis gives him another chance to spill the beans. Shin realizes that he has no choice, so he tells Avis everything, and Avis is surprised to find out that Shin is a high human. Then Isni also confesses that Shin is her master, and though Avis doesn't understand the relationship between them, he now understands why Shin has such a high mana level. Shin apologizes for holding back when they initially started fighting, and Avis is pissed that he let him risk his life for nothing. Shin wonders if there are any records about high humans, and he tells him that there is only information about how strong and skilled they are. He informs Shin that there are still people who revere him as a god, and Shin realizes that he has big shoes to fill. But he's confident that his blacksmithing skills will meet the people's expectations. Avis is surprised to learn Shin is a blacksmith, and Shin offers to help him fix up venom. Avis doesn't trust Shin because he looks like a suspicious merchant, and he's not moved even when Shin offers to give him a discount on repairs, if venom ever loses its spark. Lasha suddenly regains consciousness, and she is surprised that Shin somehow made it out alive. She notices Isni, and she wonders who she is. Isni introduces herself, but Lasha takes a while to process the information. She suddenly enters fangirl mode when it dawns on her that the famous Isni is sitting in front of her. Lasha suddenly gets nauseous and she feels sick. Shin apologizes for this after realizing that her condition was caused by Avis's speed. Avis tells Shin they can part ways at the gate since he's done his work, and anything that happens in the church will be their responsibility. Isni commends him for being more sincere than his tone suggests. Shin decides to give him some magical letters so they can communicate, and he asks Avis to send him a message. Avis confesses that he'll have to be very desperate if he resorts to using the letter, and he warns Shin that he'll be dragged into a dangerous situation if he gets a message from him. Shin figures out that Avis doesn't want to involve outsiders, and though he understands the principle, he tells Avis he'll gladly be involved. Shin knew he wouldn't be able to sleep, knowing he'd abandoned Avis after they'd come so far together. Avis tries to turn down his offer, but Shin tells him to take the letter because he can't abandon the first friends he's made with. Avis tries to keep the conversation going, but Shin is losing his patience, and he tells Avis to take the letter and save him further embarrassment. Avis takes the letter, promising and not to show any restraint, and he shares a moment with Shin before walking back to the kingdom. Isni is happy that Shin hasn't changed after all these years, because he never boasted about his strength, but he always protected the weak. Shin tells her they need to get going, and Isni gladly follows him. They arrive at the Moon Sanctum, and Shin is crying. Schnee is greeted with the sweet aroma of a meal being cooked. Tiara suddenly comes running out in a frenzy, and she informs Isne about Shin, who came looking for her, claiming to know her. Isne calms her down, and she notices that Shin is with Isne, which surprises her. Shin tells her it's better they have dinner first, since they've been through a lot before he fills her in on the story. Isne informs her that Shin is having dinner with them, and Tiara wonders why. Isne introduces Shin as the owner of the Moon Sanctum, and Tiara is wildly surprised because she knows that the owner of the sanctum is a high human. Shin reminds her that he introduced himself, but Tiara informs him that she didn't take him seriously. She proceeds to sincerely apologize for not realizing he's the owner of the Moon Sanctum. Shin understands that she just realized she's been talking casually with her boss, and he tells her not to worry about it. Shin tells her to drop the formalities and decides to introduce Yuzuha as his elementalo while they're still on the topic of introductions. Yuzuha announces that he's hungry, and Tiara is surprised that he can talk. Isne serves dinner, and Shin is amazed by the dishes served. Tiara confesses that she's never seen such dishes before, and she praises Isne for going all out. Shin is glad that the ingredients he gave to Isne were useful, but Tiara is curious about the ingredients he gave her because she noticed a strange aura around the food. Though Shin doesn't notice this aura, he informs her that the ingredients are meat from a thermal lion and an orc king, radish and aroma onion as vegetables and idea, and topaz pear as the fruits. Isne tells her she added some extra ingredients which were the best she could find. Isne confesses that she didn't have time to make the best meal, which makes Shin look forward to better meals in the future. Tiara is losing her mind after realizing they just used high-end materials which are extremely rare as dinner ingredients. Shin isn't bothered by this, but he wonders why the meals have an unusual aura about them, so he asks Isne. She tells him it's the remnants of the mana and life force of the powerful monster and rare plants they used as ingredients. Tiara is sad because no one is listening to her, but Isne tells her to calm down and eat before the food gets cold. Shin says thanks for his food, but he's surprised when Isne and Tiara imitate him and say thanks as well. He finds it funny that they adopted his tradition. They finish their meals, and Isne informs him that the other support characters are now living their lives. It was wishful thinking for them to believe that Shin was still alive, so they decided not to fret. Shin was glad that they didn't waste their time waiting for someone who may not be around, but Isne tells him it would have been of their free will if they did. Tiara suddenly tells him he's worrying needlessly, but Shin realizes she's drunk from the excess mana after she claims to be seeing two Schnees. Isne decides to put her to bed before she hurts herself, while Shin proceeds to his bedroom. He's happy to see that the place hasn't changed because he always felt relaxed there. Shin hits the sheets, but he's woken up by something heavy beside him. He thinks it's Yusuha, but he sees him sleeping at the foot of the bed. He turns to his side and he's surprised to see Isne lying beside him. Shin realizes he's in a bad situation, and he tries to wake Isne by touching her face, but she just holds him tighter, while whispering his name with tears rolling down her eyes. Shin felt bad about the tears rolling down her face, and though he didn't know why she was shedding tears, he silently apologized for whatever caused her sorrow. The next morning, Shin wakes up, but he doesn't see Isne beside him anymore, so he figures out that she's already awake. He notices silver hair beside him, which makes him raise the bed cover to reveal who was beneath it. He's surprised to see Yusua under the covers, but in its humanoid form, and he tells her to put something on Hug. She decides to use him as her source of warmth. Shin presents her with clothes that Elementales wore when the game was still active. He tells her the cloth will shrink to her size, and he can change the color to whichever one he wants. Yusuha has some problems putting the cloth on, so Shin helps her out. They stop out of the bedroom, and Isne is surprised to see that Yusuha can transform into her human form. Isne decides to make a new table setting for Yusuha, so they can have dinner together. After dinner, Shin decides to question Yusuha about the day he picked her up from the shrine. He asks her why she was at the shrine, and she tells him she was in the shrine because it was the most comfortable place she could find. He asked her if she knew what the symbol on the floor represented, and she told him she didn't know. Shin thought the symbol reduced spell symptoms, but he's disappointed that he couldn't find out the symbol's meaning. He then asks Yusuha if she knows anything about people disappearing 500 years ago, and she tells him she doesn't know because people didn't come by often. Shin wonders why she was staying there, and she tells him she was trying to stop an earthquake that almost split the ground into two. Shin figures out that elementales can intervene during natural disasters because they can manipulate all the elements. Yusuha tells him she was hurt by all her effort, so she decided to rest in the shrine, but he came to her aid when she almost gave up the ghost. Shin informs her that he only made it in time because Millie informed him about her. Yusuha makes a mental note to thank Millie for saving her, and Shin recommends packaging a gift to that effect. Izne suggests they make kafol, which is a type of elven bread that Tiara makes. Tiara informs him that kafol is one of their top-selling products after she decided to sell it on a whim, but Shin reminds her the meaning of it. She says the Moon Sanctum isn't a food outlet. Izne informs him that they can't replenish their stock of swords because he's the only one who can unlock the armory, and Shin promises to make some swords later on to replenish the store's inventory. Izne tells him she'd like him to meet Gerard as soon as he can, and Shin is surprised that he's still alive because high beasts only live for 150 years, and it's been 500 years since he last saw him. Izne informs Shin that he doesn't have much time left, and that he'd only been holding on because he was waiting for Shin. She reminds him that Gerard united the high beasts to form the Farnid Beast Alliance, and Shin remembered that he was the first beast leader. She informs him that the current leader is the 8th, and that he has the might and abilities of a leader. That allowed Gerard to wait for him in peace. Shin realizes he has to put everything aside and go see Gerard. He decides to travel normally after putting things in order since Gerard isn't in any immediate danger. He asks Yusuha and Izne to be ready to travel the next day, and Tiara thinks she'll be left to take care of the ship, but Izne informs her that she'll be going with them. Tiara wonders what will happen to the shop, and Shin tells her they'll bring it along so she doesn't have to worry. He tells everyone to start getting ready, but he realizes they don't have much to do because they only lack food and a few equipment. Izne decides to report the Skullface incident to the kingdom, while Shin decides to head to the guild after making a few swords. He also decides to take up a job close to Farnid so he can rank up, but Izne wonders where they should meet up, since they're splitting up. He tells her he'll inform her through a message card, but Izne suggests they form a party so they can voice chat. Shin activates the option, and Shni suggests that Tiara uses her golden opportunity to become an adventurer. Tiara agrees with her, and Shin tells her to meet him at the forge. Shin takes Yusuha to the forge, and he tells her not to touch anything because some of the swords are cursed. He's glad that most of the swords are still usable, but he decides to make more swords. He makes the first sword, but he realizes the sword is too big for him. It's even higher than anything that's being sold in the country. Shin makes some swords the shop can sell, after which Tiara steps into the forge, apologizing for taking so long to find an outfit. They go outside the Moon Sanctum, and Tiara is glad to be outside after so long. With this, these episode end. Friends, tell me, how do you like this episode? Do not forget to like and subscribe. See you on the next video. Thanks for watching.